Hi everyone, this is Miss Ann here at the Warminster Township Free Library, and welcome to another Tales and Tales Take a Note. Today we're going to be talking about making bleeding tissue art using the bleeding tissue paper and a white crayon to kind of create a watercolor resist art project. So what you're going to need with this is tissue paper. It's a special kind of tissue paper actually that when in contact with water will start to bleed. You will want watercolor paper, white crayon, a sponge, a cup, and some water. What we provided for you is all the things minus the water. So if you picked up a kit, you will have the watercolor paper, white crayon, sponge, tissue paper, and the cup for the water. So step one is to draw a design using the white crayon. I know it will be kind of difficult to see. So you might want to press a little, with a little bit of pressure so that way you can kind of at least feel where the crayon is. So create a design, whether that's, creating like a landscape background or, creating little flowers, whatever it is, create that design, because that will show up at the very end. So now it's time to wet the paper. My recommendation before you do so is to put something down underneath. My orange felt there is kind of to protect the table, but if you have some sort of tablecloth, maybe newspaper, this could potentially get messy. And do remember to, wear some clothes that you're okay with getting a little messy, because the tissue paper does bleed pretty well. But it can also stain clothes, so just be extra careful. So first you're going to wet the paper. Now you're going to wet the watercolor paper first, and then you will see by adding the tissue paper what happens. So using that sponge, you're going to add water to the watercolor paper. Now it's time to add the tissue paper on top of that. So once you've wet everything down, you can take a piece of the tissue paper and start layering that on top of the white watercolor paper. And you see, I kind of just laid it on top. You'll see right away with this special tissue paper, it will start to bleed right away, but you may want to add some extra water on top, and that's what the sponge is for. You can dip it onto it. So as you can see, you can dip the, the sponge in some water and just dab it on top of the tissue paper as you're going along. And you want to get that tissue paper pretty wet. You will start to see it bleed. That's a good sign that you've gotten it pretty wet. You don't want it to be soaked, but you want it to be pretty damp, all things considered. And you may want to do this over a tablecloth, as I mentioned, or scrap paper, just in case, because it does bleed pretty well. I kind of already mentioned that, but always a good idea to mention it again. Okay, so now the next step is to let it dry. My recommendation is give it an hour or so. Let it dry completely. Go outside, go for a walk, do some of the activities that we have for our summer reading program before coming back to this. Step 5 is, once dry, you will remove the tissue paper. So you can, either just dump the card and then, all the tissue paper will fall off. Or what I did is I did it in stages. And as you're doing that, you will start seeing some of the drawings that I put in there. I made a little sun, some flowers, some birds in the distance, the ground cover. But whatever you end up deciding to do, that will show up, because the crayon is actually made of a wax that's water resistant. So when you have things like watercolor over the crayon, it will not saturate into the paper wherever you put the crayon, which is the case here. As you can see, the white crayon leaves behind a fun design, and that is part of the fun. Oh, and I have a little smiley face for my son. When you're doing this, you could also try to layer certain colors where you want them. It's a little bit more difficult. I kind of went with, whatever. And feel free, we gave you enough tissue paper that you could potentially do this again. And we hope you enjoyed this craft activity. Be sure to like us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And we will be back with some more, or check out the ones that have already been posted. I'm sure we'll have things like this throughout the fall as well. Until next time, everyone. Bye, guys.